Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of my lecture video. So today we'll be talking about the living cell. So first we'll start off with the cell theory. The cell theory is composed of 3 parts. Living things are composed of one or more cells. Cells are the most basic unit of life. And existing cells are produced only from other cells. So these are the 3 points of the cell theory. And then the next part of the PowerPoint is comparing prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So prokaryotes have no nucleus and they don't have membrane-bound organelles either. Eukaryotes do have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Prokaryotes are single-celled, but eukaryotes, they can be single-celled, but they can also be multi-celled. Prokaryotes don't have a cytoskeleton and eukaryotes do. Prokaryotes are smaller than eukaryotes, and prokaryotes do cell division by binary fission, while eukaryotes do cell division by mitosis. Prokaryotes have no meiosis during cellular sexual reproduction, and eukaryotes do involve meiosis during sexual reproduction. Okay, so it's believed that the first cells were prokaryotes, and then they evolved to eukaryotes, and this idea is endosymbiosis. So we do need to know the person that came up with this, and her name is Lynn Margulis, and she proposed this in the 1900s. And basically what she proposed was that some organelles were once cells themselves, but then bigger cells ingested them but didn't destroy them, and so they became part of a bigger cell. So an example is mitochondria used to be another prokaryote called aerobic bacteria, but then it got ingested by another cell, but it wasn't destroyed, so it started living in that other cell, and then slowly it became part of that cell. Okay, now we're gonna start talking about organelles. So organelles it literally means a little organ. So it's only found in eukaryotic cells. The main roles of organelles are cell boundaries, controlling the cell functions, energy transformers, and support and locomotion. Locomotion means movement, by the way. So when we look at a cell as a big unit, there's 2 main parts. There's the nucleus, which is the control center, and then there's cytoplasm, which includes all the other organelles and cytosol. So look, you see these little things, those are organelles, and they float around and they're part of the cytoplasm, and then they float around in cytosol, which is the liquid stuff that holds it in place. So cytoplasm isn't the stuff that holds the organelles in place. Cytoplasm refers to everything other than the nucleus that's inside the cell. So cytosol and all the other organelles are part of cytoplasm. Okay, so now let's zoom into all of the organelles. So we have the nucleus first. So the nucleus includes the nucleolus, chromatin, and the nuclear envelope. So chromatin is the chromosomes, and it's hereditary information, which is DNA and stuff. The nucleolus is what makes the ribosomes, and we'll talk about ribosomes later, but just know that, so this is the nucleolus, and that stuff makes ribosomes. And then the nuclear envelope is the nucleus's membrane. So that's why we say membrane-bound organelles, because organelles like the nucleus have a membrane, and the membrane for the nucleus is the nuclear envelope. And this membrane contains pores. So let's look at this diagram I drew over here. This over here is the membrane of the nucleus, and you can see that it contains little pores, these white little circles. And then in the center, we have the nucleolus, which makes the ribosomes. Okay, so now let's talk about the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is a big part. It contains all of the other organelles plus cytosol, which is the fluid stuff. So let's dive into all the organelles of the cytoplasm. So the first thing is cytoskeleton, and it's usually made up of microtubules, microfilaments, and I don't know how to pronounce that, intermediate filaments, I think? Yeah, intermediate filaments. And so microtubules, you can think of it as the cell's highway, and also it gives shape and structure. Microfilaments, they help with movement and basically moving your muscles and flexibility and stuff like that. And intermediate filaments hold cells parts together. So like you can think of ropes that hold all the cells parts together. Okay, so our next organelle is called vesicle, and it's basically these small short-term sacs that carry stuff around. And then it's like a storage sac basically. And then the mitochondria, you guys all know this, is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's like where cellular respiration happens. The ribosomes, so you can find ribosomes in two different places. It could either float around freely in the cytosol, or it could be attached to the rough ER. That's what makes the rough ER rough. So it's involved in protein synthesis. And remember, just a quick recap, the nucleolus is what makes the ribosomes. Okay, now we're going to talk about the endoplasmic reticulum, which I'll call ER for short. So basically, its main job is making and processing different substances. And then there's two types of ER. There's the rough ER, which has ribosomes attached to it, and there's the smooth ER with no ribosomes attached to it. So the rough ER is involved in like the protein synthesis because it has the ribosomes attached to it. So basically, the ribosomes make the protein, and then it goes through the ER, and the ER helps process and modify those proteins. And then the smooth ER just processes and modifies and makes lipids. Okay, our next organelle is called the Golgi complex. The Golgi complex modifies, packs, and sends proteins to different areas. So think of like a post office. The Golgi complex is the post office of the cell. And then the lysosome, so if you have K-Hall in his PowerPoint, he calls it the suicide sac, but I feel like that's kind of complicated to know. So a better metaphor for the lysosome is the digestive system of the cell, since it just basically breaks down debris. And then the vacuole is just stores everything. And then next we have peroxisomes, which just breaks down toxins and converts fats to carbs. And then this one's not in plant cells, it's in animal cells, and it's called the centriole, and it's made out of microtubules, which, remember over here, it's made out of microtubules, and it's used in cell division, and it's usually located in the centrosome. And then, so the centriole is located so the centriole, like, animal cells have it, but plant cells don't. But these two, plant cells have it, but animal cells don't. So the cell wall gives structure and support to the cell, and the chloroplast is where photosynthesis happens. Okay, and then the other two organelles are for movement, and they're made out of microtubules. And so first we have like cilia, which is like short hair-like structures. They basically push all the stuff, like, and like it moves it. And then the flagella is like a long whip-like tail. So an example would be like a sperm. You see over here how it kind of like, it's like a tail that makes it move. A sperm cell would have a flagella. And then this isn't part of the cytoplasm, but it's the cell membrane. And it's what's outside of the cytoplasm. It's what's outside of the cell, and it's like a boundary around it. So really quickly, we're gonna compare the plant cells and animal cells. So plant cells have chloroplasts in a cell wall, and they have a large central vacuole. And then animal cells have a centriole, and also their vacuoles are smaller, and there's like multiple. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the cell membrane. So the cell membrane is involved in two main things: maintaining homeostasis and controlling what passes through the cell. I think I pronounced homeostasis wrong, but like it's homeostasis, my bad. Okay, so the cell membrane is a bilipid layer with two sheets of phospholipids. So remember when we learned about lipids, how there was like one type of lipid, there's the triglycerides, and then there's the phospholipid. So this is what the phospholipid looks like. There's like a phosphate head over here, and there's two fatty acids coming out of it. So this phosphate head is actually hydrophilic, which means it attracts water, while the fatty acid tails are hydrophobic, meaning they don't attract water. And so basically the hydrophobic tails, they tend to like push each other, and they start facing each other, and then the hydrophilic heads face the outside. So basically things can't go in because like it's like blocked because of this structure. I think like if you go back to my lipids and carbs video, I think I talked about this. Okay, and so eukaryotes have cholesterol, and so remember the steroid cholesterol? This is the cholesterol, and basically it separates the fatty acids, and like it gives stiffness and strength to the membrane. So like it's in between the fatty acids. Okay, so proteins are also in the membrane. So we have two types of proteins that are in the membrane. We have the peripheral, which is on the surface, and then we have the integral, which is like inside the membrane. So we're gonna mainly talk about integral proteins, which are the ones like inside the membrane. So like there's many types of integral proteins, and we'll talk about some right here. So first we have the transport protein, and it's basically like a gate in the membrane. So there's two types of transport proteins. There's the channel and the carrier. The carrier, like, it kind of opens up, like it opens up and then like things can go in and then it delivers it out and then it blocks it again. And then a channel is like it's literally just a channel. Things only certain molecules that fit can go through. So this one you can think of it as like opening and closing and it carries it through. And a channel is you can just go through if you fit. And then next we have receptor proteins. So receptor proteins, they transmit information through the membrane, and like when a specific signal molecule fits, it triggers a response. So there's two types of receptor proteins. There's the intracellular, which is in the cell, and then there's the membrane, which is at the surface. So the intracellular receptor protein, it basically like responds to signals that can pass through the cell membrane. Like so like since it's inside the cell, it only responds to the signals that are like that have already passed through the membrane. And then the membrane receptors, it's on the outside. So like signals that can't pass through the membrane, they'll be transmitted by the membrane receptor protein. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about oh, sorry, my bad. I didn't clarify that well. So these are still like types of integral proteins. So the third integral protein is cell surface markers. So it basically identifies other cells, and it does this by looking at the carbs attached to the other cells. So it kind of like determines what kind of cell you are so it can let things in. And then the fourth type of integral proteins is the enzyme, which you guys know already. And then the last one is basically like proteins that attach the membrane to the cytoskeleton. So all of these are integral proteins. Okay, and there's also carbs in the cell membrane. So there's the ones attached to proteins, which are called glycoprotein. I don't know how to pronounce that, glycoproteins. And then there's the ones attached to lipids, which is called glycolipids. And then the last one we need to know is really weird. It's called fluid mosaic model. And basically it's this model that kind of like represents the cell membrane. And so like basically each tile is like a molecule and they're all floating on water. And so they're arranged in like this very flexible and fluid way. And so like they compare the cell membrane to this because it's fluid and it's an ever-changing structure. So like over here, this is all floating on water, and then each tile represents a molecule, and so they're arranged in this like really flexible way. And then like the cell membrane is like this dynamic quilt of different molecules, and they can move around and work around to control what goes in and what goes out. And that's all we need to know for this lesson, which is the living cell. This one was kind of complicated because the notes are arranged in this really weird way. But if you have any questions, go ahead and ask me. All right, thanks for listening.